Over the past few months, I've watched all of Quentin Tarantino's films. I wanted to talk about what makes this man a special director. Is he a special director in the first place? Because in some ways he is a polarizing figure, although he is respected amongst many spaces and has been successful both critically and commercially. He does remain a polarizing figure in some respects due to sometimes the content in his films, and sometimes it's whether or not his films are the marvelous auteur creations that some believe them to be. So I've seen, especially since I started really following his work, let's say interviews on YouTube and this and that, and in the comments, sometimes you see someone say something like, "Oh, he makes films for people who think they're people who think they, have an artistic bone in them, but don't really, because they don't know what the difference is between art and slop." No one has said that specifically. That's my paraphrasing of all comments of that nature, as I remember it. But I think no matter what you think of him, he is an interesting figure in cinema, and definitely someone whose films you should look into, because if he's spoken about in so much quantity, in so much volume, the least you could do is look into his work and see if it works for you or not. Or maybe it doesn't now and it will later, or it does now and it won't later. First movie is Reservoir Dogs. It showcases how to keep a story compact and suspenseful. The story in itself is like a bomb waiting to go off. And if you're making a thriller, what better stakes would you want to have than create a story like that? And I think he did with that. Features some very good acting from Harvey Keitel and Steve Buscemi, and amazing acting, amazing stage direction as well. For this to be his first directed piece of work, I think really a success. And it was made with a budget of $1 million, if I'm not wrong, and it ended up grossing $3 million. So, in almost in all the respects, it was a success, and I think time has been kind to it as well. It's still a film that holds up, and it's one of my favorite films from Quentin Tarantino. I've learned a lot from just watching it and reading its script. I've learned a lot about how to keep a story compact, and how to use location to help you in making a smaller story, but also helping raise the stakes at the same time. Therefore, if it's a small budget thing, you can still get a lot out of that story, even though you don't have many locations or multiple resources at your disposal. So, Reservoir Dogs, all in all, one of his best works.
Come on, I need you to hold on. This cop's waiting, moving a block away.
And then we move into Pulp Fiction, which is widely considered his best work. I've seen Pulp Fiction two times. That's not enough to speak on the film, really, to be honest. But hey, I had to start the channel at some point, right? But I might talk about Pulp Fiction sometime in the future, months later, years later, who knows. I find it interesting how it hosts more than one story, more than two stories, and has links between the stories, but they also exist as their own things. I wouldn't say, oh, it's a fun film. Not necessarily. I mean, the funnest things in the film are the performances, to be honest.
Man, I didn't mean to shoot the son of a bitch. The gun went off. I don't know.
But in terms of Pulp Fiction as a film, It feels like an experience with the potential shown by Reservoir Dogs mixed with the confirmation shown by Pulp Fiction that this guy was someone who was going to stay. There's similarities, but also wild differences between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, whereas Reservoir Dogs was more kept more compact because of budget constraints, much smaller film. Pulp Fiction was a much bigger film, a lot more locations, a lot more big name actors and actresses, and you can tell Quentin had a lot more wiggle room to showcase his trademark filmmaking techniques. Whereas Reservoir Dogs showed the potential, Pulp Fiction showed what that potential can be if it's backed with money and resources. It's on a lot of greatest of all time lists. This film, I think it's because of the non-linear plot that gets a lot of people. I like it, but it's not there for me. It still hasn't left that much of a mark on me that I would say, oh, it's one of the greatest films of all time. Maybe from a filmmaking perspective, there's a lot to learn from it. Personally, I wouldn't put it up there, but it is a good film.
Whose motorcycle is this?
Zed's.
Who's Zed?
Zed's dead, baby. Zed's dead.
Moving on, Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown is my favorite Quentin Tarantino film. First of all, casting Pam Grier in the titular role, recasting Samuel L. Jackson. This time, we're not on his side. Let me just say that. He is a full-fledged villain in this film, and he plays the shit out of that role. And Pam Grier plays the shit out of her role. She plays a character who is calculating, who can feign weakness, but is 2 steps ahead of most people that she shares a room with. And it's a film I feel excited thinking about. If you haven't seen it, it's not one of Quentin's most popular films. Jackie Brown, funnily enough, sounds like a lot more work was put into it than Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. It feels like the script for Jackie Brown took longer to write. It's not like necessarily that, oh, a script has to have been worked on for a longer time for it to be a better script. I just think it didn't feel like things were happening on a whim. It's a very calculated story, and it features a lot of calculated characters. Won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. I think should have won an Oscar for, or at least get nominated for Best Lead Actress for Pam Grier. But there you have it. Jackie Brown. I think anyone who hasn't seen Jackie Brown should go see Jackie Brown. Just might surprise you.
You ain't asking the right questions.
You know, I'll bet I could fry an egg on your head right now.
I think what it is a story of a woman who has gone through hurt and trauma and years of it, actually, and betrayal. That betrayal that came by way of someone who was supposed to be the love of her life. And she becomes so angry, she just goes for everybody that she once considered a friend or a partner. And Kill Bill is split into 2 volumes. It was shot at once and was supposed to be one film, but the runtime exceeded 4 hours, and Tarantino did not want to cut out any scenes, so he split it into 2 volumes. Again, he's the director that is not usually told what to do by the studio or by the production company. He decides what he's gonna do, and they say yes or they say no. And for the most part, they said yes. And Kill Bill's divided into 2 films. Sometimes it might get a bit groggy having to watch the 2 films, especially back to back, but they are meant to be watched back to back because they are 2 parts of the same thing. I read from some people who don't like Quentin that much, that he always said that he wanted to make 10 films, and he was getting scared that he would mess it over and make a dud in one of those 10. So he decided to make Kill Bill 2 so it could count as 2. But speaking of duds, Death Proof was Quentin Tarantino's 5th film. By this point, he's a household name, more than a household name. He's won numerous awards. Death Proof was part of a double feature directed by Quentin and Robert Rodriguez. The double feature is called Grindhouse. And Death Proof, to put it short, is for many reasons Quentin's weakest film. It's just weak because it feels like a Quentin Tarantino parody film. You can't really copy yourself, right? But it felt like he was trying something out that he had already done before. It just didn't feel like he was saying anything new. For the 3rd time, actually, this film features lead roles played by women. You have Rosario Dawson, you have Zoe Bell, who was a stunt woman, who also features in The Hateful Eight, which we'll talk about shortly, who was a stunt woman, and this was her first acting role, at least her first lead role in acting. And I think she was very fun to watch in the film. In fact, the performances, for the most part, were not bad, in my opinion. But the film in general just felt like a short film that was stretched out and then spread through too thin, to the point where it felt a bit like nothingness. It felt like Quentin was trying to milk a cow that he had already depleted. So Death Proof falls flat because of that. When you think of a Quentin Tarantino film and you think of how convoluted the plots are, Death Proof just doesn't match up because it feels like it has been spread too thin. Quentin himself agrees that this is his worst film. I mean, it's pretty glaring. He has expressed his concern to not make a film like that again, or of that level, and hopes that he will retire with that being his worst film. Going out of 2007, comes in 2009, and comes in Inglourious Basterds, a reimagining of a World War II story. And I think it's interesting when you take a piece of real history and mesh it with fiction to create a kind of historical fiction that is fresh. So it's not a retelling of things that actually happened. It is in some ways, but in other ways it is fictionalized. Amazing performances all across the board. I don't have to mention Christoph Waltz won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for this film. It was the only Oscar this film ended up winning. It was nominated also for Best Original Screenplay, which it lost. But coming off an unsuccessful film in Death Proof, Quentin had to not prove himself because he had already done that. And to be honest, he's white. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you don't get it right, he comes back swinging with both fists, and Inglourious Basterds smashed it out of the park. And part of the reason most people don't even know about Death Proof and don't care to discuss it is because the rest of his discography is very strong in its own right, coming out of a high that he is used to by this point, but a high which must feel new now since his last film didn't reach those heights. Comes in Django Unchained and Jamie Foxx, and again Christoph Waltz. Quentin had originally tipped Will Smith to play the lead role, but they disagreed over creative differences because Will Smith wanted a different vision for this film. He wanted to make it about black love. That's what he wanted to make it about, and I think in many ways it is about that, even without his intrusion. Disagreeing with Will Smith, Jamie Foxx swooped in, took the lead role. Django Unchained ended up winning the Oscar for Original Screenplay that Inglourious Basterds lost. It was a critical and commercial success and set the pace for Quentin's next film, The Hateful Eight, which is also a Western. And it's basically a whodunit. It features some questionable characters. You don't know who to trust, and it's quite murky who to root for because it's a mystery story. You're rooting for the demystification of the story. That's really what you're looking for. It's not one of his films that is talked about the most, but I think it does deserve its place in his filmography and in one of the higher places in his filmography, because apart from the stellar acting, Quentin is very good at choosing actors for roles and writing interesting characters and writing plots that go up and down and left and right, and then you end up somewhere you did not expect. And this film is one of those again. Samuel L. Jackson stars in what I would call the lead role. We also have interesting performances from Channing Tatum, Kurt Russell from Death Proof, Tim Roth from Reservoir Dogs. Something about directors that we regard as auteurs, they tend to work with the same actors a lot. Maybe it's to do with process and understanding what is expected. The director understanding what the actor can bring to a character, and the actor understanding what is expected to bring to a character. And more often than not, at least for Tarantino, it works. The Hateful Eight, his penultimate film, and his last film to date, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In terms of what is most talked about when it comes to Tarantino, the big violence, the gunfight, all the things that he's mostly attributed to, this film does divert expectation a lot up until the end, at least. And he does what he did in Inglourious Basterds here, where he takes a story that happened in real life and adds a thing of fiction. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is definitely one of his slower films. It's up there with films like Jackie Brown in terms of how still the pacing is, but it's longer than Jackie Brown, if I'm not wrong. So it feels slow at times, and you can tell it's intentional. And I think he's borrowing from many techniques in this film, probably more techniques than he's used in his career up to this point. There's the inspiration from Sergio Leone and the spaghetti westerns, and there's also that trademark Quentin Tarantino with the violence and the blood and all of that, but only at the end, only towards the end. And in terms of characters, there's a dichotomy here between Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who is a kind of a famous actor, used to be more famous before. Now he does shitty TV, and he has his stuntman, played by Brad Pitt, who is DiCaprio's right-hand man. It is said that these two took pay cuts in order to make this film for less money because they believed in the story. I think in this film, Quentin brings together a lot of worlds and puts them in one. You have the world of showbiz. We even get a sneak peek of Bruce Lee. We have the world of cults. We have the world of marriage, relationships, and we have internal worlds of this actor feeling like he's not good enough. And we have the seemingly quiet world of Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, who in real life was murdered. But in this film, she wasn't. And I think it was Quentin's own way of trying to not as much rewrite history, but reimagine history in his own terms. I think it was Quentin's way of sort of turning a nightmare into a daydream. I think his niche is, I want to make films that resemble the films that I grew up on and grew up loving. I want to employ styles that were used by directors I grew up loving. So yeah, there you have it. That was Quentin Tarantino. All of the films recapped. Thank you for watching. Please come back for another one. There will be another one. Bye-bye.